This is Charlie Brown Politics, and I'm Charles Brown. Today, I want to talk to you about presidential candidate RFK Jr., the man who is challenging Jim Crow Joe. That's right, I said it. Jim Crow Joe wrote the 1994 crime bill. Now, RFK Jr.'s run has been pretty interesting so far, and the interesting thing about it is that the media can only use certain site terms to describe this man. You know these terms, I know these terms. I'm talking things like anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist, right wing. Now, the method of these terms is to make you not listen to what the guy is actually saying, to not hear the substance of what the man is speaking. Now, despite the fact that the media can only use these terms to describe this man, he's been polling at about 20%. Now, today, I want to look at the history of RFK, his background, and I want to look into a few ideals and policies that I agree and disagree with that he says he'll govern by if he just so happens to make it to the mountaintop. So let's get into it. All right, now I want to talk to you guys briefly about RFK Jr.'s history. As we all know, his uncle was JFK, his father was RFK. Both these men being murdered in the 60s. RFK Jr. was only 9 years old when his uncle passed, only 14 when his father passed. Now, both of their deaths were pretty controversial. And the reason why is because a lot of people thought there was more to the story. Basically meaning, did the CIA also have their hand involved? Did the mafia have their hand involved? Now, another fascinating point to this whole scenario would be a lot of people have asked RFK Jr. recently his thoughts on, is there more to this story? And he has unequivocally said yes, time and time again, that he believes there's more to the story of his father and his uncle's death. And he definitely believes that the CIA had their hand involved. Now, what makes all this so fascinating is RFK Jr. has been calling out every major power of B. I'm talking about the CIA, the military-industrial complex, Big Pharma, and if he truly believes that the CIA had something to do with killing his father and his uncle, then that takes political courage to still speak out about these things that you feel are true. And that's just something that I find commendable and respectable about the man. All right, so let's move on to RFK Jr.'s a different aspect of his history. I want to look at him being an environmental lawyer. So, just like his father and his uncle, RFK Jr. wanted to serve people, but he decided to not do it through politics in the beginning, but through litigation. And so he became an environmental lawyer. And he's been practicing that for about the past 30 or 40 years. He's litigated over 500 cases, and he's been suing the biggest companies in the world. I'm talking about Monsanto, DuPont, and he's been suing them successfully, I might add. And so he's been using his power and his privilege to fight for the least of thee. And the least of thee doesn't always have to be the homeless and the hookers, okay? It can be about the birds and the bees, the fish and the trees, the sun and the breeze, if you feel what I'm saying. And so, yeah, so anybody that uses their power to fight for the little man, once again, I'm down with that. All right, now that we've covered a little bit of his history, I want to jump into a few of the topics that I agree and disagree with RFK Jr. on. The first topic I want to jump into is the Ukraine war. Now, there's a lot of fascinating things when I watch RFK talk about the Ukraine war that jump out to me. The first thing being is that he's not falling prey to this black and white narrative that we hear about this war of the, good versus evil. he's understanding that there's nuance to this story. Uh, Another thing that's jumping out is I'm hearing him talking about the history of how we got to this scenario where we're at today. I'm talking about, the agreement that the U.S. made after the collapse of the Soviet Union that we wouldn't push NATO an inch further towards Russia. Then here we are 1,000 miles later. He's talking things about the Minsk agreement. He's talking about the 2014 coup or revolution, just depending on which story you believe. I tend to believe the coup, my evidence being the leaked videotape from Victoria Nuland. But agree, disagree, we'll move on. He's understanding that this could potentially lead to nuclear war with another nuclear powerhouse. And just for a political candidate to understand that is refreshing. And just a little side note, just these people are the same people that told us about weapons of mass destruction, the Gulf of Tonkin, the babies being taken out of incubators and left on the floor to die. Okay, these are the same people that are telling us about the Ukraine war. And if you didn't know, the babies being left on the floor to die, the weapons of mass destruction, Gulf of Tonkin, they all lied about that. But I'm sure they came to Jesus on the Ukraine war, though. So just once again, it's I tend to agree with RFK Jr.'s stance on the Ukraine war, and I agree that we should have peace talks and come to some type of diplomacy and détente. All right, guys, let's get into the next topic I want to talk to you about dealing with RFK Jr., and that's his viewpoints on free speech and censorship. Now, this is another topic that I really agree with RFK Jr. on, and that's the government should not be censoring free speech at all. We should not be trying to control what people read and see. He recently just gave a pretty decent testimony at this House subcommittee over this very topic. And throughout that speech, he declared that free speech is the cornerstone of democracy. And I could not agree more with this point. If we have a society where we have only one narrative, and if you speak out against it or try to give a different viewpoint, you're labeled one of these cite terms that we talked about previously, like conspiracy theory. And the whole point or objective of that is just to put you in like the sub-context group, this like sub-human group where your voice, your opinion just does not matter. You're just this flat earther. And so how are we supposed to have a society that grows if we can't have just simple debate and discussion to allow thoughts and arguments to either grow or shrink? And so we've all seen it throughout the years over, the trans issues, lockdowns, the Ukraine war. We all have a certain narrative that we all have to abide by, and if we don't, then we get labeled one of these terms. And I, once again, cannot agree more with RFK Jr. and his fight against censorship. All right, guys, let's talk about a subject that I actually disagree with RFK Jr. on, and that would be his viewpoints on Israel and Palestine. If you haven't heard, he's been declaring pretty loudly his support for Israel. Now, it's not that if you support Israel that you're automatically a bad person or evil or nothing, but just in my opinion, he's not bearing witness enough to the pain and suffering that's being inflicted on the Palestinian people. He's had a few pretty interesting interviews on it. I saw one with Glenn Greenwald that was pretty interesting. And during it, Glenn brings up the point that RFK Jr. argues that the U.S. shouldn't be sending money to Ukraine. We should be spending that money here at home on roads and bridges and schools and medical. Um, and so Glenn says, if you're going to use that logic, why not use that same logic on sending money to Israel? And during that discussion, RFK actually said, you know what, that's a good point. I should look into that, which was kind of weird for someone to actually do that during a debate, let alone a presidential candidate. Um, I would really like to see RFK Jr. debate somebody like Max Blumenthal on this subject. You know, RFK, he's a man of debate and free speech, so uh, you know, people should call him out and have him discuss this topic with Max or somebody like Max. Um, but with that being said, I'm not gonna let this be a red line. It's not like I'm gonna totally write off everything he says. I'm still gonna work with him on the subjects I agree with him on. All right, guys, let's talk about the final point that I want to bring up during this video, and that is the ultimate question for someone like me, okay? Someone who is what the left is supposed to be. I'm talking about anti-war. I'm talking about anti-big bank. I'm talking about bringing down big pharma, against the CIA, Medicare for all, that type of person. The ultimate question relating to RFK Jr. is, what is he ultimately going to do after the primaries when the DNC screws him over? Okay, if you don't know, the 2016 primaries with Bernie and Hillary, that shit was totally rigged. The finger was on the scale the whole time, and it's been proven in court, okay, through the Bernie fraud lawsuit. Okay, the DNC admitted in court that they will screw over anybody they so how choose, and there's not boo you can do about it. So the ultimate question is, what is RFK gonna do when the DNC screws him over? Is he going to bend the knee and say, vote for Jim Crow Joe? Or is he going to break off and do what Bernie should have done in 2016, had some fucking political courage and started a third party, stolen 10-15% of the vote? We still would have got fucking Trump, but at least we would have had some political leverage to say, you'll never win another election without me. So that's the ultimate question. And so this was just a small dive into RFK. I want to get deeper into this. We'll do other videos on it. But for now, ultimately, I agree with a lot of what RFK has. I really like what he stands for, besides the Palestine issue. But yeah, it all comes down to this ultimate question: what's he gonna do? I've heard him say that he does not have a backup plan. What the hell that means, we don't know. I am gonna vote for him in the primary, but I really, guys, I can't suggest for you to give him money, okay? All the money that was given to Bernie in 2016 went to Hillary Clinton afterwards, and we all saw what happened with that. She couldn't beat a freaking ham sandwich. And then people like us got accused of why Trump won. So stay tuned. I want to be following this more closely. Thanks for watching the video. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe, guys.